Mechanized warfare is absolutely vital in Broken Arrow, whether you're playing scenarios, whether you're playing the campaign, single player, co-op, and especially, of course, in multiplayer, which is going to be primarily what we're talking about today. Games are won and lost on the ground, believe it or not. Sure, there's loads of extremely powerful and dominating aircraft that can control the air, but if you are able to fight through it and take the objectives on the ground, you will cause the enemy team to make mistakes or push their air into more and more risky situations to try and stop you. All it takes is a single unit to stand uncontested on an objective, and it doesn't matter how many kills the enemy team has on you, you will at the very least tie at the end of the game. In a perfect world, if you are able to do it before the game time runs out, they can have you down in kills 10-1, but if they fail to take back any points within the 2 minutes, they will still lose. If you plan and time it right, a final push at the buzzer can snatch away what the enemy team may think was a certainty, but it takes a lot, and I do mean a lot, to get to that point. Today, I will be doing my best to teach you everything that I know about mechanized warfare from start to finish. It will be lengthy, but check your tags in the timeline to skip or rewatch if required. This took thousands of hours of experience in games such as Wargame Red Dragon, World in Conflict, and believe it or not, games like Arma or Squad to earn the experience that I have and the understanding that I have in order to teach subjects just as this, on top of the dozens of hours of work to make this video in particular. And then of course we can't forget hundreds of hours already in Broken Arrow itself, between multiplayer matches, co-op, and very much so the scenario editor, which for those that don't know is somewhat simple to use and can allow you to do whatever you want within the game. We're going to be using that to teach every subject that I couldn't show through live gameplay in real time. Now, it's possible that some of you are at the stage where you ask, but wait, where do we start? I understand there's a point where you literally don't know what to buy and where to put it. This is, in its purest form, how to play Broken Arrow, while this video is about mechanized warfare. So what I'm assuming is that you guys that are watching this video already know at least somewhat how to play Broken Arrow. But if you don't, it doesn't mean I'm not going to try. I will try to teach you how to play even with just mechanized warfare. Just please try to keep in mind, if some of this isn't clicking for you, it's because you're going a little bit too fast. So even though it's outdated, go check out my previous how to play Broken Arrow videos, and that should help you out. And a lot of these concepts that I talk about in this video are actually brought up in those videos as well. So that's something that is super important while also being super complex as you start to play more and more complex enemies and as you get better at the game. This is one of those things that I can teach you the basics of, but I can never teach someone every starting tactic situation for every player in the world. Believe it or not though, you can actually get pretty damn close. There's only so many maps, there's only so many units in the game, so there's only so many things that you can do. Another series that I'll be doing will be metas along with opener and closer tactics with certain decks for mid and high level players, so stay tuned for that. But there's a reason why I chose to have my first tutorial video for Broken Arrow at release be mechanized. With mechanized warfare, you are the game. You are the problem. You make the decisions. It doesn't matter as much what the enemy team is doing on one objective or part of the map, because if you decide that you want to roll another objective with 6 tanks, they will need to address that or they will lose the game. Sure, they can come and kill you, but that's also in your favor and you'll learn why. Now, there's obvious good ideas and bad ideas of how to start, which you will learn from this video as well, because I will explain the good and the bad of mechanized warfare by way of what's a good situation for you, what's a good unit for you, and what's bad specifically for both. So at the end of this video, you'll know what you're strongest against and weakest, where I hope it goes without saying, you should push the stuff that you're strongest against, while preparing against the weakest and hoping for some help from your team as well. There's one thing you need to do though, and that is establish a front line. Every properly supported front line has 5 things: recon, a holding force, a pushing force, AA, and logistics. What to buy and where to put it is something that comes with time. I explain the best units in these decks. All you have to do is buy them and play. After a while, it will start to click what is a good idea and what is a bad idea on what map in what situation. So whether you flip points at the start of a game like I do most of my games or not, your first choice should be recon, followed by some units to hold the line, then units to push forward, the AA to cover all of those units, and the logistics to keep everything moving and shooting. Past that, don't worry about where on the map too much. If you're new, just go where your teammates aren't, but somewhere close by with a good amount of objectives. With this gameplay, you are going to be pushing objectives or stopping the enemies from taking them. Then that is the most beautiful thing about mechanized warfare. You decide what happens. happens because you are the mechanized player. If you push efficiently enough and cause enough problems, the other team will need to play off what you do. You will call the shots. So TLDR, establish that front line, and don't do anything until you can complete that checklist in your head. Recon, holding, pushing, AA, logistics. Chances are things will get scrappy while you set that stuff up, so play it by ear and have fun with it. When in doubt, take what you got using the tactics that I'll explain and head for the closest objective. In time, it'll just start to click. And if you can't find where to put that front line or where to stop your recon, just keep pushing your recon and starting units up the way that I show you and teach you in the rest of this video until you either capture a couple objectives or run into the enemy. Don't move into the enemy spawn. Remember, guys, in this game, everything respawns, and actually the better that you do, the better position that the enemies are in, because they will have more points to just spy all of the units. You will run out of ammunition at some point, so you don't want to overextend, but you do want to take and hold some objectives. So keep that in mind. Now, if you consistently have trouble where you're not able to just play the game, you're not watching enough gameplay. Watch a few games of mine or others, and based off of that map, that deck, and what we do there, try and mimic it in some way. Eventually, it'll click, trust me. And again, if you need to, I understand that this is old gameplay, it's from the previous tests, but go watch my previous tutorials on actually how to play Broken Arrow. You should eventually have that help, or something should help eventually. Good luck. So again, if you find any value in this video, please share this video with a friend, like it, and let me know what you think in the comments. You can find dozens of videos of my gameplay where I use the concepts that I will be teaching, as well as follow me on Twitch to catch me live if you have any questions or looking for something real time. So if at any point you see a clip of me doing something in live gameplay and would like to see what it took to get me there or what happened after, chances are that video is already live or will go live at some point in the near future. So again, check out the videos that I've posted. Most of these games are mechanized and or armored gameplay. All right, quick pause here. What's up, guys? Fourth wall breaking Nolan here for a second. I understand some of this footage that you're about to see is very fast, and it doesn't help when I talk as fast as I talk. You're probably thinking, what the hell did I just watch? If this happens to be you, I figured I should add a bit of clarification here. It is sped up for teaching lengthy timed subjects that are big picture, so that we don't have to wait 45 full minutes to understand that I was able to take some objectives with some tanks over the course of a 45-minute game. In this fastest gameplay, the subject or talking points for that portion of the video is not granular. It will be about the big picture. You're not looking at a single unit or move or moment, perhaps in particular. You are supposed to be paying attention to the entire front line, the way the enemy reacts, the way that I react, the progression of the game. So when I speed things up, try and focus on what I am saying, as well as the text on the screen, to understand what in particular you should be paying attention to. And then you can always pause or slow down the video if you need. The big picture is what's important here for the fast forward clips. Remember that. All right. Now back to this idiot. Now to get you started, what you won't learn from this video is experience. You will only gain knowledge without having experienced these concepts or situations yourself. You will run into situations when you don't know what to do, particularly what unit to buy next or what to do with it. This comes with time. You will start to understand what units you can rely on in a given situation and those that you cannot. You'll know when it's better to have perhaps one expensive unit or maybe two or more cheaper units instead. However, from this video, you will learn how to become a psychic, as what you will be doing will require a specific response from your enemies. And given what is strongest, you can take information that you are given freely in game to manipulate and shape things in your favor. For example, if you are fighting a Russian airborne Marine deck with your US armored Marine and you gain the upper hand by pushing Abrams forward, it is practically a certainty that your enemy has a plane or helicopter that you know will be coming, because if given the opportunity, they will quickly eliminate your Abrams or your vehicles. So you bring LAVADs, Super Cobras with Sidewinder missiles, and Stinger teams in what is actually just a bait tactic to get your enemy to throw points away and trapping their expensive helicopters. Just one of the many situations you will understand with time as you learn all of the units at your and your enemy's disposal within Broken Arrow. But first, I suggest keeping the pool small. I suggest that you learn 3 specs from each nation first and only play with those decks. That is going to be Russian Armor, Russian Marine, and Russian Mechanized. Then we have US Armor, US Marine, and US Stryker. You will be hamstringed in certain areas, some of which are important and fun, but I'm slow dripping the information to you instead of making you chug it. You will lack some of the best air from both nations and some of the most fun as well as easy to use units. The reason why is because air and artillery are a crutch and easy to use but hard to master. Ground combat is a difficult to use but easier to learn, get good, and eventually master system. So I'm telling you, you should learn ground first before taking to the air or go into your artillery to solve a problem when tanks and infantry will be able to handle it great. However, these decks will have access to artillery and air in some cases that, when you feel comfortable, can be used to elevate your gameplay and support your team the way that you think you should, and also how they think that you would. What I mean by that is, as you get better and learn the units, the teams around you, especially when you solo queue, will as well. So based on what they see you choose, they will expect that you've brought the best units for those specs in order to support the team, and maybe make a decision of what deck they're going to use based off of what you have chosen. For example, US Armor bringing the M270s to counter enemy supplies and SAMs, or Russian teams expecting that you bring your SHORAD, like the Pantsir, Derevitsia, Sosna, and Tor for US helicopters. And that is if you are using a Russian armored or mechanized. This, of course, on top of the assumption that you will be pushing objectives in order to win on the ground using a mechanized focused, or at least very capable, deck. There are direct and hard counters in this game. Unit to unit, spec to spec, deck to deck. If a full team takes rock, then it only takes a few people on the other team to pick paper, and you will have almost no chance of winning that game, let alone if the entire other team somehow picks that counter. Yes, if a unit has a weapon, it's going to be able to kill things with that weapon, but what I am talking about is situationally, there are times, whether it is your mistake or the dev's mistake in terms of the way they balance the game, that it is a statistical improbability, if not certainty, that you will win that game based off of time, based off of economy, based off of the speed, the armor, the efficiency of the units that you are fighting with or against. So we are going to be building some decks based off of this, and again, they will be missing some things. Just remember, learn and get good on the ground. Then when you eventually start using your air and artillery to support you, you'll be ready. You'll be good at the ground. That is the most important thing, rather than learn them all at the same time. We're going to build 3 decks here for each nation. I have the files saved on my Discord to direct import. However, you need to learn something about using other people's decks in this game. When you create a deck, you have a specific idea in mind, perhaps a specific unit that you would like to use more than others in a specific way that will influence the way that you build that deck. If you don't know what that influence or idea is, you might miss out on the actual success of that deck. So I suggest that what you do is follow along with me and create these decks yourself, or again, copy the decks, but it's important that you listen to what I'm about to say as I build them, as I talk through these decks. Okay, so this is going to be the deck portion. It's important to pay attention at the bottom of the screen there. There's going to be some tags that allow you to skip ahead or skip back or whatever. They also will be on my Discord in a separate category of the deck portion of the Broken Arrow category inside of the Discord, so that you could just install or download the decks yourself, and it also has instructions in there how you can do that. So in particular, we have Russian Armored, Russian Marine, Russian Mechanized. Those are the 3 decks there. Then we have US Armored, US Marine, and US Stryker. Each of these decks uses a different variation of those 3 specs within each faction, and they do a very particular thing that is important in both the way that they are used and the way that that nation or faction does things in mechanized warfare. So for Russia, we have Tanks Don't Care, APS Dagger, and just heavy in general, or APC heavy in general. So for Tank Don't Care, obviously we have 2 armadas here. We have a lot of heavy tanks. We got the 3 T90Ms up in Recon. We got the 3 T90Ms in the vehicle tab. We got the 3 BVMs, and we have the 2 armadas. This is going to be the deck that if you want to really push tanks, get good at tanks, get good at heavy armor, this is going to be the one that you use. Your answer to any question with this deck should be push armor forward, keep armor alive, take objectives. That is the whole point of this deck. So we've got the 3 T90Ms with maxed out for weapons and customization in the Recon tab. Also want to make clear, whenever I say maxed out, that means absolute most expensive things for that unit. The Spetsnaz VMF, they are just there to spot things. You do not need to give them the 50 cals. You can try and figure out a way to give them the 50 cals if you would like. They're very powerful with the 50 cals. They're very good anti-infantry and anti-light vehicle, but that also makes them significantly more expensive. So pay attention to that. PDSS so that they can cross rivers if you need to. BTR 90, so just a little bit quicker wheeled transport for any of your infantry units that you're going to be able to fit into the BTR 90. We got the Gornastrelki, which are very good at holding tight places. They're just generally speaking a good infantry unit, and you can also bring the BMP-3Fs with those guys. Those are maxed out for the BMP-3Fs. 4 Verba, because that is your SHORAD, and then you have the T-15, which is your heavy armor APC with the Kinzhal model. That is the 57 millimeter. A lot of people use the T-15 thinking that the boomerang is what makes it the T-15. In my opinion, and I think most people's opinion, it is the 57 millimeter. The attackers, they love to throw them away. They love to just derp them in the side of buildings and or just miss whenever something gets, loses line of sight or something like that. So the attackers can be powerful when they hit, of course, but the 57 millimeter, the armor, and the ability to carry 8 troops is what makes the T-15 the T-15 in my opinion. We also have the Sturmoviki, which is very good anti-infantry. They get 4 smokes. They have heavy armor, and if you bring the BMOT, that has okay armor, and it's got 2 smokes as well, so useful for getting up into tight spaces. Get that infantry up on top of that objective, especially if there is other infantry in there. Get them to throw their ATGMs at the BMOTs. Use your smokes, get up close, use your smokes with the infantry, distract them, get them focused on the infantry, have the T-15s behind there, have the BMP-3s somewhere also close to that, and have your tanks close to that as well as heavy armor for being able to actually hold that point and push through literally whatever the enemy has out there. You should be able to armor your way through it with this deck. The support tab is just that. You are supporting that kind of gameplay. You have the 350 to be able to do a bit shorter SAMs. You have the 300s with the giant missiles, the longest range SAMs in the game. You have the Baryusas, or the Strelets rather, to actually protect both of those when you put that SAM net up, something that we will talk about later. Also a bit of SHORAD if you want to move that forward. Derevitsia, fantastic anti-helicopter. SHORAD, you get a smoke, so make sure you pay attention to that. It's also some useful fire support because you do have the 57 millimeter. It is the same that you get with the T-15. The Tor, awesome SHORAD, also a bit extra when you turn the radar on against intercepting cruise missiles, taking out those helicopters from a distance. Also the Pantsir, it's going to be the best in slot for this deck for sniping helicopters off in a distance, which is going to be important with a deck like this. They are going to come after you with helicopters, and they are going to come after you with planes. Again, something that we will talk about later. Catran for essentially just reconnaissance. That is what this is there for. If you get into an oh shit moment, the rockets are going to be able to help out with that. But primarily, this is a thing that flies over objects because it is a helicopter, so it's going to be better line of sight because you can see over things, and it's got 2,400 meter range with the optics, so it's very useful reconnaissance. Mi-38 for supply and moving troops up to the front if you need to. These planes are here just to spot and take out drones. If they absolutely need to, if they happen to be there, yes, you can send them after other planes, but that is absolutely not what you should be focusing on. You need to be focusing on the ground. If you are worried about drones being above you, if your teammates are not doing a good job spotting those drones, especially when you're playing against the United States, you're going to need to worry about the Sentinels. You're going to need to worry about stealth things. You're going to need to have something in the air to spot those things. If your team is not helping you out, if you have some airborne players that are not helping you out, you got to do it yourself. So that is what those are there for. You have a couple of specific oh shit moments. KH-32s. These are very fast cruise missiles. If you direct hit anything in the game, if you direct hit, it will kill it with that HE value of that, with that cruise missile in particular. So you have 250 points if you have to be floating, ready for tanks. If you get pushed by something, if you notice a AA net that's not being protected by something that can intercept cruise missiles, a supply point that you really need to get rid of, something kind of just quick, easy. This will allow you to practice getting cruise missiles in on things, and in particular with Russia, when you are using your armored marine deck, it's a very useful deck. You would see a lot of gameplay with this one. The Tu-22 with these fast cruise missiles is quite effective with this deck. I suggest that you do practice it a little bit if you do have time to just dabble a little bit with air power. but do not use it as a crutch. The important thing, as I've explained, is try to use your ground vehicles to do whatever it is that you want to do with this game. Next, we have APS Dagger. One of the easiest counters, or one of the most simple and most often counters to armor in this game, is armor. You're going to find a lot of Abrams out there that they're going to meet you out there because they're probably going to be trying to take the point as well. If they're going to be pushing into your point, yes, they'll try to bomb you. Yes, they will try to artillery you, which we will talk about, but they will also push you the same way you push them, which is with heavy armor. This deck allows you to practice that cat and mouse game of trying to get ATGMs in on armor. What a lot of people don't understand is, yes, APS is a thing, but what they don't understand is how APS works. The way that APS works in almost all cases is that when you send 2 ATGMs at a vehicle with APS, the second one will get through. Only the first one will get intercepted, and then there is a reload or some kind of aiming time, whatever you want to call it, although I believe it's called a reload time of the APS itself. That is a few seconds. So if you send 1 ATGM at a time, it will get intercepted. If you send 2, the second will always go through. So you have the BMPT Terminator. These will shoot both of their attack-ATs at the same time. And then you have the Karistema, which will shoot both of their ATGMs at the same time. Particularly with the Karistema or Chrysanthema, you also have a very effective HE ATGM, something to pay attention to as well there. If you guys are looking for statistics, remember to use this little slider bar right here up at the top. Unfortunately, the devs decided to make it a default to have that clicked in the other position so that you can just get the quick facts. If you're looking for the details to know what's good and what's not, it's through that slider there. So the BMPT Terminator is also very effective at infantry in general, along with those attackers. So if you need something a bit more armored and mobile, you have the Terminators. If you are trying to snipe in particular, these Chrysanthemas are here. However, they do not have a smoke. So if you get caught in the open with these Chrysanthemas, they will die to APCs, they will die to tanks somewhat quickly because they have no ability to hide. They have no smoke. So what I suggest is that you team them up. You have 1 BMPT Terminator and you have 1 Chrysanthema teamed up so that if you get into trouble, you have both the attackers and the Chrysanthema missiles going at the target while you're using them on offense together. You have both the attackers and the Chrysanthema going at the target. However, if you get into trouble and need to back up, smoke with the Terminator, keep the Chrysanthema with it. You're going to be able to hide behind that smoke and get out of that situation. Otherwise, this deck is a armored mechanized deck. You have the tanks, you have the T-15s, you have the infantry from both of these, and you also have the BMP-3M. It is fantastic. I think that for your money, this is the best APC, IFV, whatever you want to call it, whatever the nomenclature is, in the game. Coincidentally, we also have the BMP-3M Apoca, which is solid in its own respect. However, it does not get 2 smoke. It does not get the 30% ECM with the BMP-3. I suggest that you use both of these if you are using this deck to see which one you like more. This one also has the 57mm, similar to the T-15, but it is not the T-15's 57mm. The 57mm off of the T-15 is a high velocity round. It is a different gun. This is lower velocity. It is not the same. However, it's still 57mm of autocannon pain. You get the Coordinates for anti-tank, and you get the Bulat rockets for anti-infantry, and it's no slouch in terms of armor for APCs. It's not the same armor as the T-15 as well. It is just useful fire support, but with only 1 smoke. You do want to watch out where you put it. It is not as defensible as the BMP-3M or the T-15. Just keep that in mind. You have limited SHORAD at some capacity for infantry, usually with these, so that is why I'm bringing 2, both the Verba and the Motostroke Igla. You can mess with these a little bit if you want, perhaps maybe get rid of the Igla, but this is a very good vehicle down here with the MTLB. You get the Zeus cannons, or Gishes in this case, and you do get the Igla ends, which are pretty solid range. Well, they're man pads that they stuck onto a vehicle. So pretty solid anti-helicopter support that you can also put 8 troops in. So you can kind of mix and match. If you want to put one of your recon squads or several of your recon squads in one of these and push them up with a bit of AA, you're able to do that. However, that Igloo squad is the only squad that you're able to bring those with. So you can mix and match a little bit if you want. This is just a decision that I've made here. The Verbas will get the job done, as I will explain here eventually. 2 is 1, 1 is none. You only get 1 launcher, and it's 4 dudes. So I suggest that you stack these up, you keep these guys together, and all together, there should be basically 3 little teams of man pads between these Iglas and these Verbas that you can bring along with you. Now, if that fails, you have, with the Russian Mechanized, some of, if not the best SHORAD in the game because of the Pantsir and because you get the Derevitsia. It is great. If you would like, you can bring the you can bring, rather, the Sosna with the Strela. You can turn it into a Sosna if you'd like. However, you can do it the same thing, much better, essentially, with the Derevitsia because you get the smoke with the gun AA or the missiles that you get with the Pantsir. So that's why I'm saying just bring 3 Pantsirs, just bring 3 Derevitsias. Obviously, the Pantsir is very expensive, and you're going to want to put one near your S300s and your Bucks when you deploy them as the counter to seed missiles or cruise missiles going into your AA. So a bit of a mix and match ability with this deck in particular because you have fantastic SHORAD, you have a bunch of fantastic tanks, you have the ability to specifically counter one of the most common, if not the most common way to take a point, which is enemy armor with this Chrysanthema. It's not just tank versus tank, it's tank on the front line, but then also a bit of support with something that will do a very good job at killing heavy armor with these ATGMs. A bit lighter tanks is just something to throw into the mix. Good APCs, as I said, strong SHORAD, along with some of the best with the longest range S300 there, and great mid-range SAM with the Buck M3. You also get to dabble a little bit with the Koalitzia. So the last deck, as I mentioned, with those cruise missiles, it's okay to dabble with it a little bit, but do not use it as a crutch. It can also be expensive losses if you forget to call it back out or if you use it at the wrong time. The exact same thing can happen with this deck. Now, I've added the Koalitzias here. A lot of people get sucked into the artillery gameplay. It is good to dabble with it if you're quite proficient or if you're playing with a full team stack where you're able to divert some of your focus from your front line so that you can start to dabble a little bit with artillery. It does become quite effective. Having an armored deck so that you can use these Koalitzias, especially with the cluster in particular, can be quite effective and quite useful to your team because it's something that it doesn't have the best range, but that's still 4,200 meters of thing that is able to easily dispatch supply depots. That is going to be something that we'll talk about in the gameplay portion. Just don't get sucked in to the artillery. Something that you're also able to do with this is you're able to put smoke screens down for your own units, something that we will talk about later. You have 500 points in your air tab with this. So it's very unfortunate, but that is the reality because that's what you get as a mechanized deck. So you have time or you have ability to bring in a single plane. It's also not a cheap plane. It's not an expensive plane, but it's also not a cheap plane. So you can't put R77s on this, or it seems like you can't. Okay. Made a mistake when I was making this. Put R77s on this. Let's see if we can do one more. We can, and it's actually perfect that way. So save it that way. Unfortunately, it is more expensive. So with the R77s, you're going to get 7,000 meter range. This is there to spot drones. Be very careful, and this goes the same for the other decks too, when you bring these planes out, at going and killing the drone yourself, because then that puts you at high risk to be shot down by the enemy's AA, primarily. And ideally, all you need to do with this unit is use the 12,000 optic range, which is probably why I kept it as cheap as I did there. And you can mess around with that yourself, although there's not really a ton of other things that you would mess around with in this deck for those points. So again, primarily what you are doing here is you are using this plane to spot those stealth drones, to spot those stealth planes that you think are an issue for your friends who are potentially failing you in putting up their own planes if nobody's airborne, which is a travesty as Russia. However, if it happens, it's brutal. So you need something to be able to spot those drones. You need something to be able to spot those stealth planes so that your friends and even yourself in this situation can then shoot them down. But if you can't see them, you can't shoot them. So that is what that is there for. Just be very careful with it. Same thing with the Coalitia. And while we're on the subject, same thing with the Pantsiers. Those are expensive. That's 250 points. That's most of your tanks or vehicles or APCs or infantry. That's a significant amount of points. So watch out with that. Coincidentally, also, 95 points is not nothing. So be very careful with the Chrysanthema. You cannot defend it against the things that it is most likely going to be shooting at. So keep that in mind. You do not have a smoke. You do not have heavy tank armor. Try and keep it with something that can take some shots and smoke so that you're able to hide, so that you're able to get away. Primarily with this deck, you will need to watch out for artillery. I mean, with all of these decks, you're going to need to watch out with artillery. But with this one in particular, you're a bit lighter. There's some lighter units. When people start to realize the actual armor values of these units, they are going to focus you with artillery because, again, it's an easier target. They are lighter, and you can get a lot of points. You can take a lot of firepower off of the field by countering this. So be very careful against artillery players with this deck in particular. So third deck, we have APC Heavy. Similar to the first deck, just a lot of, or correction, the second deck, just a lot more APCs. So we have Marine Mechanized with this. We have the 50 cals. These are fantastic anti-infantry along with being great eyes. So this is great anti-infantry and great light vehicle, but the problem is you don't have any armor, you don't have any transport, anything like that that has eyes of its own. So if you're going to be pushing forward, all you have for your eyes are infantry and helicopters. That can create its own problems when you're making mechanized pushes. So just be very careful with that. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to try and screen with the cheapest stuff possible. That is why you are seeing 245 point T72 B3Ms here. And that's why you're seeing 6 BTR 80s, 6 BMP3Ms, and then again, we have the BMP3 Apokas. So primarily what you are going to be doing with this deck is a lot of infantry warfare, a lot of keeping a holding position or keeping an objective supplied with fresh meat. So you're bringing in those Gornostrelkis, you're bringing in this Mortostrelki, you're bringing in the Sturmoviki, you're bringing in the Arganimbacheki, whatever the hell I would, pronounce that. You're bringing in the sniper squads to hold that urban environment, and then using these vehicles as fire support and general support to hold that against what will almost certainly be a lot of artillery, a lot of air support, and a lot of heavy armor coming in at you. When you get pushed by heavy armor, this is going to help, and this is going to help. Also, of course, the tanks are going to help. They are going to focus on eliminating your heaviest armor and eliminating your ATGMs. This is going to be something that we will talk about at the later portion of this gameplay. It's going to be the hard counters and the things that you need to look out for when you are making a mechanized push. The big thing to remember with this deck is this is a holding deck. Yes, you can take some ground with the amount of tanks that you have, but primarily it is you are supporting the front line by holding an objective that is attempted to be taken by the enemy. So it's not quite the same as the other decks where those are really push people out. This is more hold people that are trying to push into you. So there's a lot of speed and there's a lot of numbers and there's a lot of infantry with this one. So it's a very different play style. However, you do have a lot of similarities to the other ones where you do have the Pantsier, you do have the Strelets, you have the Vityaz, you do have the Buck, got a little bit of artillery, which we'll talk about here in a second, and you do have the Cessna. I do think it's important for people to be able to check out what the Cessna can provide, which is the long distance SHORAD, but it is not a Pantsier, and it is not something like, for instance, a Tor. You can't turn a radar on, so it can't increase the range, and it can't intercept things. So it is literally just there for helicopters. Sure, it can shoot at planes, but generally speaking, this is there for helicopters, and it's a cheap way of dispatching them quickly. It's also amphibious if you need to cross some rivers or something and try and be sneaky with it. Starlets are going to be your real wall. That's going to be the thing that intercepts incoming cruise missiles, because when you're holding territory, that is going to be something that you're going to need to worry about, and you're going to need to worry about planes. Now, you can't get any of the heavier things in terms of SAM systems with this deck. You can't get any of the heavy S300s. You can't get the 350s, but those are 300 points, so they get quite expensive. You're gonna need to watch out for that. So you can supplement, for instance, if you want to get rid of one of your artillery pieces or even both of the Cessnas and then bring in another Vityaz, if that's something that you are confident doing, being able to micro and pay attention to your SAMnet, which is something that we'll talk about later, then go ahead. If you want to bring one more Panzer instead of the Strelets, go ahead. If you want to do anything like that, go ahead. You have some leeway. Akatsias, they're solid mid-range artillery. 3,500 meters. You can bring some smoke with you if you do need to push into a point. If you do need to hold a point, it's going to be useful for that. And also, it's going to be nice to be able to reach out and touch something in terms of supply depots, in terms of infantry that might be bulking up, in terms of IFVs that might be bulking up, because otherwise you have no ability to do that. This is not an artillery deck. This is not an airborne deck. You need something with this if you're going to be holding ground to just, you see something in the distance, be able to do something about it. Now, it is the same price as Malkas. Those can reach further distances. They just shoot a lot slower. So it's up to you. I think you can get some better learning opportunities out of using the Akatsias. Again, it's up to you, but it's a good idea to bring a little bit of artillery and get used to using a little bit of artillery when you are defending in this game. Because what's also going to happen is people might not be ready to push you, and they might be screwing around. So if you're trying to hold that point, you gotta try and dabble on probing. You gotta try and dabble on getting eyes out to see what's exactly going on. Are they ignoring you completely? Are they stacking your teammates? Things like that. I'm getting out of the scope of the explanation of this deck. Anyway, this is a holding deck. It's not necessarily the same as the other ones. I think I've done a good job explaining that. Now, moving on to the United States. This is the heavy deck. So this is Armored Marine. You've got SEP V2s for pushing people out with some eyes, with some armor. You don't have APS. Keep that in mind. But what you can do is lays. So definitely try to remember that. I forget about it all the time. So if there's a very particular target that you're worried about, something that may or may not be able to be, oh, I don't know, cluster artillery, or again, oh, I don't know, hit with slammers or something like that, and you just need to make sure that you keep eyes on it, this is the unit to do that. Just put it in the open, pop a smoke when ATGMs come at it, keep eyes on, make sure that it is where you need it to be so that you can hit it with something. You got lots of snipers that you can sneak around. You got Force Recon that you can also sneak around, but it's also good anti-infantry. You got Cav Scouts. That's mostly so that you can just bring the Cav Bradleys with you so that it's just a bit better eyes, but that you have the toes. So it's different than the, what's it called? The B-Fist, where the B-Fist doesn't have toes, but it does have the 2,400 meter range. So you can mess around with it a little bit. If you guys aren't so proficient with sneaking scout snipers and infantry around in the back line, potentially maybe only bring a couple of scout snipers and then bring the B-Fist with you, or maybe only bring one SEP V2-2-0 with you and then bring the B-Fist. But I do really suggest that you stick to this deck in general. I have had a lot of time using a deck very similar to this, or at the very least, a Armored Marine. These are great. Everything that I'm about to explain is great for the US in terms of pushing through things. So that's the Recon tab. Infantry, Marine Raiders, great. The MAAAWS is fantastic. Close range AT. We're going to explain that in a little bit here. Mech Engineers, primarily anti-infantry. The ESV Bradley is fantastic anti-infantry with the Blams. We got the regular Bradleys here with the Mech Riflemen because you're going to try and bring as much SHORAD as you possibly can, and you can only get 4 man pads with this deck. Marines do not get Stingers. In the Infantry tab, Armored does, and it's an opportunity for you to be able to put a couple of Bradleys in your deck, which are solid IFVs. They're great IFVs. ACVs, not fantastic, not that great. I just realized that I didn't have the autocannon on here. I do suggest you do up armor it and that you do bring the autocannon with you. So what that means is I'm going to try and take away some points somewhere. So we're going to do that. And it's also speedy. So up armored, you get the Bushmaster 2, solid close support or fire support. You only get 1 smoke. That is also something that you're going to see with the United States. Only the tanks get 2 smokes. The IFVs do not get 2 smokes. So keep that in mind. When you push up and take a location, it's important to keep something there so that you can hold that position. ATGMs and close range AT is going to be important for that. The SMAW is also dual use. That has HE values to the SMAW as well with those thermobaric rounds, so they're very useful close range things. Close range just launchers, along with what the Marine Raiders get there with the MAAAAWS. None of this is particularly like anti-infantry. Sure, you have the mech engineers, but this isn't like a you go into an urban environment to fight with infantry deck. You go into an urban environment with your APCs and with your tanks because there's somebody that is very strong at holding that, and then you leave a little bit of infantry behind so that you can then hold it with the cheapest things that you can find, and then move your tanks elsewhere where they're probably needed more, because they're very good at pushing. So, Set V3, we have decided to not put APS on that. If you are struggling, go ahead and put the APS on there, and you can remove the 1A2s so you can make up the points, and then you can dabble with that the way that you want. I've been experimenting with it a lot, taking the APS off of these tanks, but at the same time, especially when you're newer, you're going to want to make sure that you have some wiggle room. You have some room to make mistakes. So that's why I'm putting the Set V2s in there. They're 350 instead of 375 or whatever it is for the 385 for the V3s, so it's not as expensive, and you do get more of them. So you're able to do a bit more because you do have the APS, so you can make a couple of mistakes. If you think you're going to make a couple of mistakes, if you're really pushing hard, make sure that the V2s are there. And also, coincidentally, it's going to be easier to remember. Push hard with your V2s, because also, again, because these don't have APS, but they do have the extra optics because the V2s have 1400. So that is something that we're going to talk about later. So basically with this deck, heavy push, bring your V2s, hold and support with your V3s and your other anything. If it doesn't have a V2 in the name, basically, that's something to pay attention to because unit identification is important. So yeah, you got a bunch of heavy tanks, you're going to be able to do well with them. The LAVADs are fantastic. SHORAD, they're fantastic anti-helicopter. That's why they're there. Make sure you're using that way. It's going to be something that we talk about later. The Gimlers, fantastic against enemy SAMs, built up supply depots, light targets, things like that. Something that we will talk about later. You do have an obligation to your team when you are playing American Armored to bring one of these with you so that you can use them in the best way possible, which is something that we will talk about later, and that is anti-SAM. That is regarding countering the enemy SAM systems. Bradley SHORAD, very solid SHORAD, very solid anti-helicopter. You can snipe, you can turn on those hellfires to actually be able to snipe, and you do get a smoke grenade so that you can hide, and you got a little bit of armor. You do have better armor, significantly better armor than the LAVAD, so if you're really pushing into somewhere, make sure the LAVAD isn't seen because it's going to die, but the SHORAD, you can take a little bit of a hit if you need to. If planes are an issue, you have the Pack 2s. It's also partially a obligation to your team to use those Pack 2s. They do have the longest range SAM. They do have the longest range SAM missile for the United States, so that's why you want to put those up. You can also get some good practice actually using them, actually properly using them with proper support, proper logistics with these PIVADs and with these, you need the supply trucks in the first place, but you want to make sure they're supplied. We'll talk about that later. The helicopters, the Viper's going to be great at QRF, SHORAD, or AA. So what that means is quick reaction force. So if you messed up, if you forgot your AA, if you forgot your SHORAD, or if you're getting completely dominated by helicopters, you can bring up the Vipers, have them handy. It's also useful that you can see out to 2,000 meters. Unfortunately, there's no way that you can see out to 2,400 meters, like most Russian helicopters, especially in these positions, or like what you can do with the Apaches, but oh well, you get 2,000 meter range. That's why you got to try and use these scout snipers. That's why you got to try and have those TUAs and those Recon Bradleys around so that you can see, you can sneak them up a bit closer and still see out at a distance. So this is mainly here as eyes, and then they can also be quick SHORAD if you need it. And also those Sidewinders, they do go against planes, so quite handy there. This is for supply, this is for transport, this is for supply, this is for transport, because you can't put 2,500, which is not, it's not a little. That's not a little amount of supplies. That's a very useful amount of supplies for just 65 points to get up to the front line in a pinch. F-18Cs, they are slow. Try not to fight planes with these. These are there so that you can spot enemy drones if they are flying above you, or if there is something particularly annoying going on in the air, you can contribute to that. Just make sure that you do not lose them. It's a lot of points. That is one of your Set V3s, which is one of the strongest tanks in the game. Yes, it's not using APS. That's why I'm saying it's not one of the, or it is one of the strongest tanks in the game. Without the APS, you do need to watch out for that. That's a lot of points to lose if you throw it away, or if you miss one plane, or if you miss one missile from one of those SAM systems. Just be very careful, guys. As I said, you don't want to be in the air. You don't want to be using artillery. Those are very heavy crutches. This is learning mechanized gameplay. F-18D is another oh shit moment thing. You can put a slammer on something if you need to. You can get a little bit of practice of that. We'll talk about that later. Next, we have Armored Stryker. You have no helicopters with this deck. So every single thing that you spot is going to be either from a teammate or on the ground, but it does leave you lots of possibilities to push very hard and quickly. So dependent on who you are as a player, you can get rid of some of these bookers, you can get rid of some of these Stryker ATGMs to bring in more tanks if you want, and especially if you're playing on a team stack, this is a bit more useful. If you're playing with a team stack, you're going to have some friends you're going to be able to communicate that ideally will have some armor, that will have some helicopters. That way you can bring the full force with the APS of these heavy Abrams and then support them with heavy ATGMs. These Stryker ATGMs are fantastic because at these ranges, you are only going to get countered, if you use them at the maximum range, by other ATGMs when you have a smoke and you have APS. These are fantastic at trading with other things. And not notice how I'm not just saying vehicles, but other things with ATGMs, because you get both a anti-vehicle ATGM and a anti-infantry ATGM. Also keep in mind, because it threw me for a loop there a little bit, these are overfly anti-vehicle ATGMs, so you're good to go there because they will top attack. So important to do there. When you're facing heavy armor, have these out here as a little bit of bait, have them in the fight, but really what you should be focusing on top of keeping these alive, which we'll talk about here in a minute, or, you know, probably in several minutes or whatever, you can try to flank and you can try to get these on target. It doesn't matter where you shoot these from. If they go and hit the target, they're going to do a significant amount of damage because it's top attack. Same thing goes for infantry, but you only get 4 rounds there. Keep that in mind. Bit of fire support with your bookers as well. Also something that you can trade out. These things are not that armored. I wouldn't even call them heavily armored. They're just armored. Solid frontally, not great on the sides, not great in the rear, and not great at the top. But 50 millimeter go pop, 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 and it does have a bit of APS, so you can find useful things to use it on. You do get a bit of infantry. Now, when you take a objective from the enemy team, you're going to have infantry to deal with. So it is nice to move up there quickly, or if it's maybe you don't need to move too quickly, it's nice to move up there with a bit of armor and drop something off that's going to be able to eliminate that infantry. These combat engineers and these mech engineers are going to be able to do that quite swiftly. Every single other thing is there to support. So we have the man pads. You're going to want to bring as many as possible. A deck like this, somebody might try to exploit you with helicopters. The helicopters are going to be able to go through these guys somewhat easily, especially the rocket helicopters from Russia. You're going to want to bring as many SHORAD as possible. You're going to want to bring as many man pads as possible. We'll talk about that again later, but that again is why you see 8 man pad squads here. Those are 8 stingers in total. We'll see what that ends up looking like whenever you try to shoot a Russian helicopter with those. The troopers, you get some close range AT and you get some long range AT. Keep in mind, you only get 2 shots. So at most, you will have 6 javelin shots. If the enemy smokes, you will not kill a single vehicle with those javelins. You'll hurt them when they hit, but if the player that you are fighting is competent, they will smoke, the javelins won't hit, and they are utterly useless because you only get 2 of them. Otherwise, they're just some infantry to be able to hold against if a player sends a bunch of vehicles your way. You can hold the point that way while primarily supporting with your other vehicles, particularly this one. So this is the first time that, this, at least in this video or this explanation, these decks, that we see the Stryker RV Javelin Trophy. It is my opinion that this is the best vehicle in the game. Coincidentally, it's also an IFV. You can carry 6 troops, which you can put scouts in. I barely use them. The Cav scouts, generally speaking, are in a better position. But you do you, boo. You can put two cavalry scout squads in one of these, and I do suggest that you use these as much as possible. It's not heavily armored, but it does get some APS. It does get a smoke. It can laze. Primarily 2,400 meter optics, fantastic. Javelin, fantastic. Bushmaster 2, great. It does get APS, and it can move quite quickly. So use it that way. Have it take positions quickly that you can then support with your heavier armor. Speaking of support, we do have our Stryker SHORADs. Great up in your face when you put the stingers on here. Unfortunately, it does not get a smoke, which is what these are here for. If you think you are going to need to smoke, if you think you are going to need to hide, use these. If you need to be quick and you're worried about helicopters, use these. The stingers will shoot faster than the Hellfire, but again, it is nice to have the Hellfire as a bit of assistance there to be able to snipe at those helicopters at a further distance. Gimlers, because again, like I mentioned before, you're armored. You want something to be able to use those cluster. You want to be able to hit those SAM sites, something we'll talk about later. Pack 3 MSE, it's starting to really show up. It's starting to hit hard. It's the 16 HE with those. The range isn't the furthest, but when you put the radar on, of course, it can be very effective. But luckily, with this Armored Stryker deck, you also get the Pack 2s. So you can make a very, very strong SAM net with the 2 Pack 2s and the MSE. Just make sure it is well protected, which we will talk about later, and make sure it's well supplied, which we'll also talk about later, which is why all of these are here. Reminder, I am posting these decks in the Discord as well. If you're not able to follow along, or if you're not quite sure what weapons I used on these, go ahead and go download these decks. Put them into your deck file, or put them into your deck folder for Broken Arrow. Restart the game if it's already started, because I don't know if it does it in real time. Perhaps it does. And then you're going to be able to see the exact units, so you'll be good to go. We got the Viper up here. Exact same thing as before. It is there to spot drones, and it is there to spot other planes. It's there as a bit of a helper if you are getting particularly pestered in the air. Do not use these too often. That is 300 points. That is not nothing. That is not cheap. As you can see, even with the APS, it's almost a V2 trophy. It is even more than a V2 TUA, which is heavy armor. It's stuff that you're going to want to have on your front line. And remember, we are playing mechanized warfare here, so it's important to keep those around. Now, this one you might get into some trouble with. This is a nimble deck. You only have the Marine Abrams, which are not very good, especially with when you compare them to what you're mostly going to find, which is the heavy, a lot of heavier armor, harder hitting Russian tanks. So, not ideal, but it is armor. It's better than an APC, especially frontally, and that front gun or the main gun is extremely effective because it is kinetic. It's not an ATGM, it's not artillery, it's real time, and it hits hard, especially with the FEP because you get the HE round. Again, we will talk about that later. So you're going to want some tanks with you, but otherwise, you are nimble. So, mostly Stryker. Mostly, because the Marines, AFVs, and IFVs are kind of dog shit. They're not that great. They don't really add too much. They sure as hell don't add as much as the Strykers. So when you go and you look at it, let's go break it down. RV Javelin Trophy, as I explained, potentially the best vehicle for the US. One of my favorites. Use it as much as possible. You can stick almost all of your Scout Sniper squads into just one, and then you can disperse your Scout Sniper squads when you get up there. Also, what's pretty handy is this Humvee, because you do get a smoke, and obviously it's not the furthest, but it's also not nothing with the 1200 meter optics, so you can just toss it down the road just to see what's up there. It's pretty handy, and it's also quick that you can put 6 troops in, which you will notice is also your scouts over here. So if you want to quickly get something cheap, infantry up to the front line, you can put your scouts in this Humvee, or if you're just ready to just get up there and put a bunch of infantry out, or put a bunch of recon infantry out, or scout sniper teams out there, you can put a bunch into these RVs, so that you can have the RVs up the front line, and you can have a bunch of 50 cals with your sniper teams. So it's pretty useful. Alternatively, on the reconnaissance side of things, you get the Vipers again, which are used in the exact same role They are QRF and an ability to have a flying eyeball that can see out to 2,000 meters. So that is very effective there. And while we're here on this tab, you got your logistics, you got your transport, and you have your logistics and you have your transport in a cheap form. Again, 2,500, pretty solid amount of supplies. That does the job. Now, again, the Marines, not great. Now, if I only had tracked things, like if I only had Bradleys with that Marine armored deck, sure, I'd bring some ACVs. But you got your what are they called? Strikers. So it's not as fast as the ACV. So if you need something, you just want, like, if you are speed, you can bring a couple of ACVs if you want. It's not the end of the world. It's fine. You're just going to need to chop something off somewhere else. Generally speaking, this will do the trick. And not to mention, you get javelins with these. Now, I did do some testing. The Stryker with the AGL, the Mark 19 and Javelin, and that's either the ESV or the ICV Stryker with the Javelin and the grenade launcher, destroys every single Russian APC and IFV in the game quite handily, other than the Kurgnets and the T-15. These are great vehicles. They're genuinely fantastic vehicles. So use them, keep them around your front line, try and get some flanks, try and exploit weaknesses in the front line of the enemy, get them behind the lines, wreak havoc with the javelins, wreak havoc with the AGLs. And you're going to need to find a way to get some of your bigger squads up to the front, which is why... Oh, I fucked up, actually. I actually fucked up. So, as you can see here, you can only carry 9 troops. But you'll see, Marine Raiders are 14. So, the only way that you can get them up there is with the King Stallion, and that is not ideal. So, let's see here. Let's do this, and then that. We'll be good to go with that. So, this is a little bit faster, and you can actually carry troops. So, that's actually a more sound setup there. Perhaps I accidentally deleted that or something when I was making that deck. For something else. But you do want to keep an eye on that for your larger infantry squads. The Marine Raiders are fantastic, especially with the MAAAAWS. And if you need anti-infantry, you have the combat engineers. And you have the fire support from other stuff. The SMAAAWS also are great for that role because it can do both AT and HE anti-infantry up close. And you got a bit of SHORAD when you bring the Stingers along with you as well. Absolutely not a urban holding deck. This is, you got a few buildings to watch out for. Otherwise, you can push through quickly. And you get a feel for strikers. And you get a feel for some of the things that Marine can include. This is not the first deck that I would choose in this situation. It's not. It's basically just the US's version of quickly getting around with things that can shoot. Basically, it's not as slow as an armored deck, but at the same time, it's not as fast as, let's say, a Stryker SF deck or a Stryker Airborne deck. But it is absolutely heavier than that Stryker SF deck or that Stryker Airborne deck. So just something to keep in mind, something to pay attention to. Again, it wouldn't be the first one that I pick, but for the reasons that I explained with the other decks, these are the things that you're able to bring to the fight. And it is some mechanized warfare stuff, and you can move a bit quicker. So if this is something that interests you, and absolutely if you are playing with a team, you can use this deck. Otherwise, the way that this works is, if you are playing alone, I suggest that you either play the Marine or the Stryker. If you are really worried about being able to see things, you're going to want to play the Marine. If you're really worried about actually being able to push through something, use the Stryker. Again, though, with the Stryker deck, I'd much rather that you guys have somebody that you're playing with. So we'll just kind of, we'll include this here. Any of these Russian decks, you can easily play solo. It's a bit, I mean, this one, it does suck not to have helicopters, but you'll get the job done. You'll be okay. You'll be fine. So if there was a single Russian deck up here that I would rather you not play solo, it is that one. But otherwise, both of these, you'll do fine. You'll do great. These in particular, I think if you're a solo player, I would start with the Armored Marine and stick with it. If you're able to play with somebody, you can do this one. If you don't have anybody to play with, I just almost certainly would not play this one. But there is something useful in a support role with what you have here with your speed, and you're kind of quickly able to get some things into an area, and you can do a bit of a support role. It has its uses. It for sure has its use. Oh, we can't forget, you have 3 slammers in this one too. So the other part of this too is that if you want to, again, this is like a heavy support role kind of a thing, quickly move into an area that needs the QRF kind of a thing. Otherwise, you're not doing a whole lot. So this is more like a small map. If this was a small map, like if you're playing Baltisk or if you're playing Kaliningrad solo, you'll be okay with this. You'll do fine with this. You'll be all right. Generally speaking, not with this one. But you do get, like, I'm going in circles. Like I said, it's faster than the other ones, obviously with the amount of javelins that you have. And it's a great support role, which is useful for mechanized warfare. Especially as the US because of the SHORAD that you can bring up to it. And the Strikers are fantastic. So if you actually get to know the Strikers and get to learn how to use them, it will make you significantly better at using this deck. It will. Because then you'll eventually get better at not remembering to pop smokes and things like that. So you can take the APS off of these and make them a bit cheaper. And then when you're able to really do the full capabilities of mechanized warfare with this deck, you're going to slaughter people. And if you have one friend to play with and they play, like, let's say like an SF armored, you're going to absolutely annihilate people. So if you find one buddy that can do that SF armored deck, they'll bring in the Sentinels, they'll bring in the helicopters. You just focus on pushing and you've got the support. You'll do great. You'll do great. So anyway, on the Russian side, it pretty much what you see is what you get. Like I said, I mean, like I've been saying, I explained what you want to use with those. So those are linked. Those are the decks. Enjoy. Have fun. Good luck. Now that we know what units will bring to the fight, we can turn on our focus to the next priority. As I mentioned in the deck portion, it would be ideal if you find people to play with. You can find people in my Discord as well as the official Broken Arrow Discord to be able to communicate in real time with. That way, if you need help, it's much quicker and, to be honest, much more reliable to get some that way. I'll explain some more tactics that you can do with a squad in a different video, as there are many. So whether you have a team or not, you are able to plan ahead on what you want to do with the decks ready to go, which is a vital part of this process. I would quote Sun Tzu if I didn't think it was cringe when talking about a video game, so I totally won't go do that, and I'll just say that most battles are won before they start. You've done this by understanding what you're bringing to the fight, and now you need to figure out where the fight will be held. There's 19 maps in Broken Arrow for now, and all of them have at least an area of the map where you can effectively push with armor, when done correctly. Some are very clumped, so they're better suited for armor that can take a punch along with infantry, while some are large and more aeronautically inclined in order to traverse that greater distance quicker. Now, you can still be successful on larger maps. You will just need to be very careful and learn from your mistakes, because you will fight the most air on those maps, and those are direct counters to this gameplay. You will regularly find success in the medium size and small maps where those using air will not, due to the distance that AA will cover more easily. If a Patriot system or a S300 is able to carry, or rather cover, an air spawn, you're not going to be able to call out too many planes without them dying. So to cap this off, I suggest that you don't get worried about playing mechanized on any map, and you use these decks in particular for these maps. For more open maps, I suggest that you use the Russian Marine and the US Stryker Marine. However, either of the other decks for both nations can still work if you just push for the closest objectives and brute force the front line. It will just take a long time to bring those units to the front, so be careful. Now, the decks I told you to use, or that I'm suggesting that you use, are there for this reason. They are quicker. They have quicker transportation so that you can get up to the front and still be able to pack a bit of a punch. For the tightest and smallest maps, I would say the exact opposite and go for the heavier armor, the better. Just make sure to fill gaps with IFVs and infantry and be very aware of enemy air. The closer you are to their air spawn, the quicker that they can jump you and the less time that you have to react if your team or yourself are not on top of the anti-air capabilities. I will say this is particularly dangerous when fighting against the US because they can and at some point will sneak a B2 nuke in on you, and the reason why it's going to be you is because you will be the prime target with your armored push. Nobody on the map will have the same amount of points that will be able to get completely annihilated by a nuke in a tighter area than you doing an armored push. On that note, it's good to remember that you will be the primary target of pretty much everything, so keep your eye on the sky, and if there is a US SF player you don't see using many planes, it's best to assume they got a nuke and be ready for that. I will explain how to do that later. If you are looking for my suggestion on how to play certain maps, just look out for gameplay videos of mine on those maps in particular. You'll probably see exactly what you need in real time. Now that you understand the environment, we'll discuss each priority threat and how to address it. First things first, support. If you have a friend playing alongside you in Discord or a trustworthy teammate in game, which is rare by the way, don't count on that, you can call these out and they will do what they can in terms of artillery or air support to eliminate them. The most powerful thing in the game is 5 people working together in Discord. When matched with fully supported armored gameplay, it makes you unstoppable. Never forget that. Just to be clear, obviously you can still lose, but remember what I said about the sudden death on capture points. Armor can brute force points, and if you can't stop them from the air because there's too much AA, or your planes and choppers are still reloading because you use them in a feint, same thing goes for artillery here, then you will lose. If your teammates can't handle it, then see if it's worth it to handle it yourself by way of your own Arty or cruise missiles that I've suggested in these decks. You have to start somewhere, and as long as you make your push, you'll be learning, taking out some ATGMs, clumped up tanks, and especially some supply depots ahead of your push, because that is just a good idea all around. The less that you have to fight, the better. One of the most important things to bring with you in your push is eyes. Bring recon units along with, right behind, or as part of a push to spot enemy units directly. This is going to put you in a fantastic position. So either have a sniper or recon squad quietly in a close tree line, bring a recon tank with your front line, have a light recon vehicle behind your tanks, or have a chopper with the best optics that you can have back a bit of ways. The way recon works is the closer that you get to a unit, the more likely that you are to see it. There is a calculation made on several factors though. The stealth of a unit, the location of the unit, and the optic range, as well as status of your unit trying to find it comes into play. The stealth number of a unit buffs its visibility in general. Being in a tree line will improve it, and being in a building will also improve it. If you are trying to spot stealthy units, then using a unit with the highest optics range is the best, as the better the optics range, the further it will be able to detect that unit no matter the situation. 2,400 is the furthest for any ground or helicopter unit, and what we will be focusing on for now. Pushing through a forest or urban area doesn't always require it, because you'll only see so far due to the trees or buildings, and then when you run across something, it'll almost certainly be within your optics range or be shooting at you, which will make it visible, and then you can shoot back. But when you're rolling around with potentially thousands of points of vehicles, it's always a good idea to see as far as you can. Meat Wave Recon works quite well in this game because of how the economy works. The instant that you lose a unit, you will get more points per tick. So if you throw cheap infantry or vehicles ahead in order to get the enemy to waste ammunition or just shoot that you can spot them in the first place, which will in return, again, make them visible and be able to hit by your snipers, autocannons, or tanks, it's a very useful trade. Grab a few Marine squads or just any infantry with high armor or troop count, especially if they have a smoke, and toss them across a field or up a road. The opposing tree line or set of buildings will light up like a Christmas tree, and you can pick off those bulbs from a distance. Or at the very least, decide whether you actually want to push that position or not. Honorable mention here is recon by fire. If you think something is somewhere but you can't see it, or your optics were damaged, which is indicated by the binocular icon in case you're wondering. If it's yellow, it's damaged, orange, badly damaged, red, destroyed. Yes, there is some different situations that this will pop up for. We'll discuss that later. So if you can't see them for whatever reason but have reason to believe they're just waiting there or potentially have their weapons turned off, just fire on position by hitting G or clicking directly on that icon, aim, and fire. You'll open up with what you can on that point. If it's a building, it will damage the infantry inside, and if it's high enough HE into a tree line, it will get the sniper team or whatever is hiding there. At the very least, it will suppress or worry the thing that you think is there and is very effective. Additionally, many people keep their infantry on return fire instead of turning the guns off, so if you get that to pop, it will start shooting back and confirm your assumption if it can see and hit you. So coincidentally, if you're one of those people wondering why I always turn my weapons off for my units that I don't want to have be seen, that is why. And even then, the game can still bug out and they just magically turn back on for some reason, so be very careful. If you don't want something to shoot, make sure it can't. Your preparations must always include a plan B, a fallback plan, logistics, and AA, both SHORAD and SAMs. Plan A does not always go according to plan, so have another idea to make the most out of the situation before you move, but in most situations, and especially when you have good recon out, it's probably better to move quick, so send it. Again, this is something that you will learn over time. This is something that you will gain experience understanding. The worst case scenario here is not being able to fight, taking too long, missing a recon team, them spotting what you're about to do, getting bombed, or artillery. Now, the times it doesn't go fully according to plan is when logistics is important, because as long as you're doing a good job keeping your units alive, you can rearm them and go again. If the enemy was slower or not at all on their logistics game, you will very likely beat them here. You or your team needs to have SHORAD and SAM set up to counter air, which should be already, but if not, you need to have something. All of the decks that I've built have S300s, Bucks, and Patriots along with their support vehicles to counter seed. There is a significant cat and mouse game that goes on with SAMs and AA in the game, which deserves its own video and will get one, but TLDR, put your SAMs in a field with the longest sightline that you can give it behind your lines and away from where any teammates may be shooting their artillery. This can be very difficult to find, but you need to find something. Set up the launchers with supply on them so that they can reload quickly and intercept vehicles in front of them. Be very sure it's at least 6,500 meters away from the enemy front line, so their artillery will not hit you and you won't need to worry about microing it unless a seed run comes in. The reason why is because most of the most effective artillery in the game is 6,000 meter range. So if you give it 6,500, chances are they won't be able to sneak it in. A way to see your distance is to click any vehicle's fire on position and have it stretch out to 6,000 meters to see what it looks like. If you are struggling with managing everything, I suggest that you forego setting up SAMs like this. Use the S350, the Pantsir, and the Patriots, potentially the MSE, somewhere nearby your push and keep the radar off. It will engage planes anyway, just not as effectively, and then you're going to be able to focus on your actual push. Just remember, these units are not cheap either, so don't forget about them or put them somewhere in range of artillery, and in some cases, in the range of helicopters. The S350 and the Patriots will not engage helicopters. They will only intercept things like planes, cruise missiles, and seed missiles with their radar on. And what they will only do with their radar off is engage planes. So keep that in mind. What you also want to watch out for is enemy recon. Honorable mention here to US stealth drone, the Sentinel, and planes with bombs. If there's a few SF decks on the enemy team, chances are they can see what you are doing because they'll probably be spamming Sentinels as much as possible. If your teammates aren't putting planes up to spot these, they will not be spotted. Meanwhile, they will see a lot. If you think that your team is not very competent at spotting US stealth, I suggest that you do not make your own pushes on your own. Stay as close as you can to your team without being on top of them, and use your planes that I have put in these decks to only spot stealth drones and planes when you can. Then your team should have something to shoot them down. All things considered, the Sentinel is slow and a drone, the F-35 is slow, and the Raptor is rare. The B-2 will cause problems, but still slow. Just spotting these should result in their destruction, but if you can't see it, you can't shoot it. Unfortunately, a lot more often than not, if your team is inept or incorrectly prepared to counter US stealth, that game is already over. You are not going to be able to spot their bombers. You are not going to be able to spot their drones. They are going to have their way with you. Keep that in mind. Now, there's a few stages of an enemy player's reaction to a mechanized push on their position in Broken Arrow. So basically, this is the series of events that will happen when you push someone with armor that you need to expect each time. There's the spot, aka the oh shit reaction, when they first notice that you're doing this, the ATGM wall, the QRF, the fight or flight, and the help. Stage 1 is the spot. Any recon that you can't see yet will see you way before you see them, especially if you're in the open. So whatever that player has prepared for situations like this will either be called out, saved for, or pushed and ready to be in the fight. If they are jumpy and impulsive, then they will begin to aim with artillery, move helicopters, or call in a plane of some kind at this point. You will never know when this happens because you don't know when they see you, but it is still important to have this in your head anytime you move up or into position to make your move or begin to move. It's essentially the point of no return. That's so you don't get distracted and your focus is in the right place. Remember to look out for drones. If you see a drone up in your general area, assume they saw you, especially if those units are in the open. Gotcha, bitch. Your focus is extremely important in this game and vital when making mechanized pushes, but you will want to direct it in different places in particular. This is the breakdown, approximately, where your primary consistent focus should remain with your push until your units are back at the supply depot rearming and repairing, and you hold the ground that you've taken. That's so you can smoke when you need to, micro your vehicles facing the best direction while fighting, not getting too close, and you're firing on the most important targets as they appear. Highly suggest that you group them ahead of time to make this easier, but it depends on the amount of units and the push. It is up to you. If you're quick enough with your mouse, sometimes it's actually better not to, in my opinion, because when you group units, they will default to staying together quite bunched up, and keeping units together is the easiest way to get them all bombed, so it's up to you. Now granted, I do it all the time, but I'm dumb and lazy sometimes. You'll see it in gameplay yourself and call it out, or you'll see me call it out, so keep that in mind. You will also need to know whether to bail or redirect your forces based on developing situations like a B2 appearing in the distance, or one of your flank recon units spotting another player's mechanized push coming towards you. The move you decide on here is completely chosen on experience. No amount of tutorials or explanations I can give will completely prepare you for what any given player or any given team will do when you're about to crush them with armor. The more you do it, the better and smoother it will go though, and luckily there is a playbook of most likely player reactions, which you should already be prepared for. Just remember, the points aren't final until the phase ends. So if you have time to crush one player, then just move to another position to counter another player's push, then do it. I have literally shifted entire front lines based off of what I am doing with just a couple of units. As long as you're mobile enough to do that, do it. These vehicles do not have fuel. They just have ammo and smoke to keep track of. One of the most obvious indicators to call off in advance is if your vehicles have critical effect damage. There's 4 types of crit damage: optics, weapon, loading, and mechanical. Then there's 2 levels of that damage and destroyed. If your optics are damaged, then you'll have a harder time spotting things. Destroyed, you won't spot anything, indicating, or rather indicated by a yellow icon for damaged, red for destroyed. Now, unfortunately, sometimes that yellow icon is orange. Generally speaking, if you see a yellow, orange, and especially a red icon for one of these things, do not put that unit in the fight. Just know that they are still capable of fighting. Chances are they're still going to die. So if possible and not damaged or mobility or mechanically able to move in any way, just get them out of the fight. Mechanical damage affects your movement. Yellow means slower, red means immobile, otherwise known as a mobility kill. And then of course the weapon can be damaged or destroyed, affecting accuracy and reload time. If it's an infantry squad, the guy carrying the weapon dies, then you can't shoot that weapon. If any of your vehicles are mechanically damaged, pull them back from the fight, because if they get their wheels or tracks destroyed, they won't be going anywhere unless you bring supplies to them, and chances are that's not happening, so you might as well kill the unit yourself unless you know you've been cleared the whole area of enemy and they can't hit you somehow with artillery. The rest, gauge at your discretion. Obviously, if your vehicles need ammo, I would pull those back too. Honorable mention here, and again, just be clear with the mechanical kills, the mobility kills on units. If you are on the ball here and you realize that you have mechanically and or mobility killed a enemy unit, that is their problem now. As long as you stay out of range of whatever weapons that vehicle might have, that vehicle is still live. That is still deducting from their economy, and they will need to try and send something to help it in order to get it back into the fight. So that is why I said it's better for you to kill your units if you're in that position, because all you need to do is just wait for that supply truck or helicopter or something to move up to that, and then just kill whatever it sends. So if you mobility kill a unit, just stay out of range of the guns and leave it there. Now here's the breakdown of the rest of your focus. What's important to understand is this isn't consistent. It's all split moments. So essentially the entire game should be played with you paying attention to your area of the map, especially when armored and mechanized. You're not sending any chopper rushes or planes anywhere. You don't really need to be looking everywhere, but it's still important to every few minutes make sure that the units that you have placed on your direct flanks are still alive, full health, and ammunition. If any of that is out of whack, you need to scan for enemy recon in that area, which is a cat and mouse game. Everyone plays differently. I'll dedicate another video to that another time. For now, if that's happened to you, just divert what you feel is appropriate given the proximity to your supply line, artillery, SAMs, and whatever you're about to be pushing with. Chances are a helicopter will do the trick, a truck will do the trick. Just be very careful. And the reason why you want to be very careful is because of lasing. In case you didn't know, there's many units which can laze targets to make laser guided munitions even more deadly. If you are able to laze targets, it's essentially a death sentence to that unit and vice versa for whatever that sniper team that got through your line can see. There is a maximum range and line of sight for these things, so keep your panic in check because the damage one sniper team can do by lasing something, or even not lasing it, just being able to see it, compared to a couple thousand points of tanks or artillery or something that you forgot about completely because you're trying to find one recon squad behind your line, is not the same. So keep your brain in check. Apart from your flanks, you need to watch the sky. You can see where the enemy planes will spawn, and if your team is solid, you might even have something in place to spot it as it spawns. 400-point planes will reduce thousands of points worth of vehicles into ash, and because that's possible, players will happily send them on suicide missions after, specifically you, because you're doing a mechanized push, so you have to keep your eye on the horizon. Keep in mind that if you don't see planes soon enough, and especially if they're stealth, you might only have seconds to react. Be sure to check what your team is doing every once in a while, and that will preferably, or peripheral vision is good here, that's what I'm trying to say, is what's going to also update you on what that enemy might be doing. If you notice the enemy you're pushing is also fighting on another flank against one of your teams, or your teammates rather, then adjust your plan accordingly. If they are actively microing against the teammate, push harder. If they left a tank or something in the open, pay attention because that likely means they're microing on you. And the same can go for the units that they have directly in front of you. If you're noticing that they are just leaving a couple tanks or AA units in the open or something in the open, then clearly their focus is elsewhere and you'll need to figure out where. Then again, adjust accordingly. I'll say this a few times today. If you ever think to yourself, that's weird, the enemy doesn't seem to be doing anything, you should be worried because that means they're either saving their points or spending them somewhere else. Now, if you don't have colors assigned for each enemy, I suggest that you go to your accessibility settings and do it so it's very clear when you're fighting multiple enemies and what they're bringing to the fight. If you have 3 or more people with armor in front of you, back up. We'll discuss bend, don't break in another video about defending, but for now, just learn what you can from those situations, and remember, with the way the game works right now, there's almost nothing you can do to stop a fully dedicated team of 5, especially if they're in a Discord call, from destroying you. Best you can do is take as many of their units with you as you can and urge your team to push as the other team's focus is on you. Now, if you see multiple colors of air or helicopters, that's pretty normal and indicative of a Discord team stack. So move your SHORAD and AA accordingly to engage while smoking or hiding your expensive vital units where you can and deal with the threats. When players do that, it's a good sign there's a little left to stop you from taking that ground that you're about to roll over with your tanks. Honorable mention is what I call wing lords. Players who at the first sign of trouble send a chopper or a plane. If you can plan accordingly and choose your units wisely, you can trade 80 or 105 point APCs for 400, 500 point planes or 300 plus point helicopters hand over fist, which can absolutely mean the difference of a win and a loss. It happens all the time. Even if you fail to take the ground, if they feed you thousands of points worth of planes that could spring you forward or leave them indefensible against the teammates' push. You are just one player. You can have another player trying to do exactly what I am teaching here, and if the other team blows their entire budget on planes to come and try and kill you, even if they don't lose their planes, they need to go reload. Ideally, kill all the things that they send, but even if they don't have time. They don't have the ability to call them back out quick enough to have your buddy next to you push their front at the same time. Or, correction, after you. There's only so many things in the game, and even worse, available at any given point of the game that can quickly stop a mechanized push, and they all fly. Meaning you will have something that can easily shoot it down, which after doing so, will leave them without for several minutes, as I mentioned. Additionally, you can actually feed them and not even need to shoot them down again, as I mentioned. So ideally, you don't want to do this with expensive stuff, but if you put some cheap units in a not so obvious spot that, you know, oh, maybe I forgot that I put them in the middle of that field next to that tree line or whatever to get bombed or artilleried, of course, attempt to move them out of the way, so that's even worse. They've wasted their munitions, but that supply wasted and reload time required for whatever they used. Also, with the way economy works, where your points per tick immediately goes up upon losing those units, it means you can buy whatever you want, actually, and faster. So it makes the enemy think they're doing something useful that they should keep doing while using supplies and spending points and things that won't stop what's coming if they played it correctly, or rather if you play it correctly. It also gives away their intentions for when it matters. So look out for people that immediately go to planes or artillery when you push them, or even just show your face and then use it against them. Last but not least, when it comes to your focus, pay attention to the time, your plan, and its effect on your economy. So for instance, if your plan was to float points for another 3 tanks, but only have 5 minutes left in the game, you need to call out those tanks that you can right now, or whatever you can right now, or they won't have time to fight for the point before the game ends. For the most common engagement distances and fights over a point, you'll need roughly 3 minutes to fight, win, and capture a point if you want those points for the phase or game end. Of course, that will change based on how fast you move, what the enemy has on the point, and what happens during the fight. But generally speaking, if you mechanized push a point that's been held by a few vehicles and some infantry, and you're generally speaking near another objective or close to it, you will need 3 minutes to drive to and again clear and capture that point. So if you're waiting until the 5-minute mark to call in your most important units for this tactic, you're cutting it close, especially depending on the map, unless it's a helicopter or plane. If you're ready to go, then 3 minutes is when you want to go at the latest. The less time you can give them to earn points back and spend them on choppers or planes after to then attempt to kill you, that's going to be the better. Also, if you're about to lose a point, but the game is about to end, it most of the time is worth it to lose what you have trying to keep the point yours until the time runs out. This is a clutch moment situation. This is a objective situation, which absolutely deserves its own video, and it will be getting one. But generally speaking, keep an eye on the objectives that you hold. Keep an eye on how many kills your team has. If it's the difference between winning and losing that you hold that point, well, the gods will bring your troops to Valhalla for holding the line and bringing your team to victory. So yeah, there were some tangents in there, but like I said, make sure that you check out the actual segments of this video so that you can hop around if you need to or rewatch something. But yes, that is everything involved with the spot stage of a push. The second stage of a armored or mechanized push is when you get into range of their ATGMs. You will always run into ATGMs when pushing someone's frontline or held objective. If you are moving along and don't run into ATGMs, then you have not hit the thing that they're actually trying to defend yet, or they messed up their deck but don't count on the ladder. Once the first ATGM flies at you, another clock starts ticking down, and that is to when that smoke that you just released to make sure the ATGM doesn't hit you goes away. If you didn't deploy smoke, then you need to, and here's what you need to know about that. There's a few different types of ATGMs in the game, all of which will be defeated by smoke as long as you stay behind said smoke while the ATGM is still in flight and the game isn't lagging. You do that by paying attention, and once the ATGMs fire, you reverse your vehicle and pop smoke. The hotkeys are R to reverse and X to pop smoke. So have the unit selected either manually or through groups, hit R, click behind, then hit X. It will deploy smoke and stay in it. From there, you can evaluate the plan that you have set up and continue or fall back. When doing so, your information gathering and probing is very important. So it's a good idea to send cheap APCs or IFVs to sniff out the ATGMs and get them to use up as much ammo as possible. That's got lots of benefits, but for you in the most important push, its benefit is telling you how many ATGMs you should be dealing with. If you run into less ATGMs, that tells you they either didn't resupply them or they moved. Both are useful to pay attention to. If you take the ground and the unit is there just out of ammo, pay attention to other areas, because if they're a competent player, then that means their attention was elsewhere for a long time. And if you can't figure out where that attention is, that's not good. Unless they went AFK for some reason, but again, don't count on the ladder there. Now, if there's more ATGMs than you're equipped to handle, you might be outgunned there, and you might not be able to push through, at least with the smoke that you have with you, especially for the United States, because this is all dependent on using the smokes that you have on your vehicles. So there's a call that you need to make based on your distance to the closest cover. It takes about 3 seconds to aim and shoot an ATGM ATGM. So if you can go from the cover of smoke to the closest actual hard cover, or if you think popping another smoke some distance later will allow you to then get to that cover, or if you can then just make it to the enemy position, then you're good. It's important to understand that. If you don't think you'll make it any of these times, you need to abort and pull back. While using the smoke as cover for your retreat, then rethink the plan. That plan may look like getting the enemy to waste their ATGMs. For those that don't know, you can just reverse out of cover, count to 3, then move your vehicle back behind cover again, and an ATGM within range and not being microed will just shoot at you, then throw that ATGM either manually or automatically into the ground or into the building or just into the air and off somewhere else. Just do this 6 times for each location that you saw an ATGM come from, and you should be good. The most ATGMs that you'll see with an ATGM team that is not being supported is 6. And if they rearm or another one moves up or something, it's immensely effective at getting those numbers down. Just be careful, because the more you do it, the more hate will grow inside the hearts of your enemy if they catch you doing it. So have a SAM ready to kill the plane that they're probably sending after the unit that's doing that to them. Next question is, how much is too much? If you don't have cover, and that depends on your units that you've brought with you and how many. If you've brought vehicles with heavy armor, it can eat an ATGM probably, but I wouldn't have them eat more than 1, which I'll discuss later. If you've brought a vehicle with APS, then it will eat the first ATGM, but if it's quickly followed by another, the second will get through. APS needs time to reload. So if you're looking at 4 simultaneous ATGMs, then 3 of those will hit you if your vehicle has APS. If it doesn't, well, then all 4 are going to hit you if you don't pop smoke. However, if you have vehicles with ECM, they can get some ATGMs to miss, but it's a coin toss, literally. Also, if you have the units with 2 smokes, it also allows you to stack a couple vehicles behind one vehicle's smoke, allowing you to stagger each use. So 3 vehicles with 2 smokes means 6 smokes when you're using them correctly. And there is not many areas worth crossing that you wouldn't be able to cross with that much smoke. All the while, the ATGMs are being thrown into the ground and wasted. This is all important to know, because you will be able to tell if you can get up in the face of the enemy, and if they're only brought in, or if they've only brought ATGMs, then they are in big trouble. When you look at the stats for ATGMs, you'll notice that the range is 2 numbers, a small number and then a large number. The small number is the minimal distance that weapons can fire. It's the same for lots of weapons in the game, by the way, so look out for that. The next biggest mistake that people make is with air-to-air missiles. If your plan is within minimal distance to shoot the missiles it's carrying, it won't shoot them. Even if you right click a target, it will actually just attempt to gun it. So yeah, remember that both for and against. When you face hug, make sure that you're not actually too close to the building, because your vehicles will shoot their HE rounds to kill that infantry or whatever. And if you are on, or sometimes clipping even into that wall of a building, it will hurt and even sometimes kill itself, whatever that unit might be, especially the tanks with some of the heavier HE stuff. So stay just off the walls, but do pay attention to sight lines, because if there's other units around, they will side or rear shot you. That's why it's a good idea to mix your units when occupying a building or group of buildings and expecting to get pushed. Not too much, so you don't lose everything in one bomb or an artillery barrage, but just expect things to get close, and ATGMs can't shoot close. That's when you need to bring, or if you're on the receiving end, watch out for shoulder-fired anti-tank launchers. That is your RPG 28s, RPG 30s, RPG 7s, RPG 27s, RPG 26s, RPG 29s, AT4s, SMAWs, MAAAAWS, and RAWs. If you see these icons, back up. Otherwise, you're good. Just eat the shots and fire back. Hopefully you got some APS, and as long as you're microing correctly to make sure that your frontal armor is facing the targets, you should be okay. Once you're confident that the ATGMs are gone, back up and get distance. You will be fine. Infantry isn't really that much of a threat when you're prepared correctly. The firepower of the vehicles in these decks should wipe them out quickly, as long as you have eyes on them. However, making sure not to gloss over those icons that I mentioned a second ago, these are close range anti-tank teams that are a significant threat. If this video stays useful past the first update, when they add new units, just be on the lookout for my evaluation of those new units in particular, because unless they make some significant changes to the game, I sure as shit won't be making this video again. So these are the actual dangerous infantry to your vehicles past ATGMs, or rather closer than ATGMs, starting with the most dangerous, the Ranger MAAAAWS. Each squad has 3 launchers that shoot independently out to 600 meters and as close as 2 meters. They also shoot tandem munitions effective up to 600 millimeters of heat protection. If your vehicle doesn't have heat protection, or if it's only on the front, do not fuck with these. Well, in fact, in these in particular, don't fuck with them at all, but you know what I'm saying here. Actually, on second thought, don't fuck with them at all, seriously. These things will devour anything in the game quite handily, apart from several of the strongest and best suited anti-infantry vehicles from the front only. Any vehicle in the game, when shot at from the side or rear from one of these, is being sent home in a jar. The reason they are so good is, again, because of the 3 separate launchers. When a squad has multiple of a weapon, that means that it can fire that weapon at the same time because there's multiple of them. There are some exceptions for single-use weapons, but generally speaking, if you see a X2 or more next to a weapon system, it's a good idea to use that squad's, or just that squad in general, over the other options that you might have in that category. For example, the Igla S from Russian Motorized has 2 Iglas per squad, which means 2 Iglas at once, which can make a massive difference. The MAAAAWS has 3 MAAAWS. If you double these up, that is 6 shooting at once. Nothing will survive those for long, and again, unless they're heavily armored frontally with GLs or high explosive or something like that, like the BMPT Terminator. Even then, it just takes some more time, and yeah, you're going to take some damage, so just be careful of that one. But generally speaking, everything else is, like I said, going home in a jar. So yeah, for similar reasons, but not as bad, since there's only 2 launchers, you have these as well. For the US, you have SMAAAWS and US Marines. Gvardy Motostrelki with Russians, the Russian armored in particular, also has the RPG-28s, which are able to pen up to 900 millimeters, which you don't want to mess with. And that's, again, the Gvardy Motostrelki with Russian armor. Russian VDV with their RPG-7s can hurt, and the Ambushers from RU Motorized is also tough sometimes. But yeah, just those there. Otherwise, keep your front facing the enemy and let your guns do the work. Now, what that doesn't say there is infantry are useless. It's actually, in fact, doing the opposite. There's a lot of discussions going on about infantry at the moment. Notice what I explained about those units in particular, and what I explained about, as a armored player, what I need to do. I need to keep my distance. I need to keep my armor frontally facing those threats. So if you are in a position to speedily get those infantry units around these vehicles, I'm in big trouble. I am going to lose that situation. Now, granted, infantry are the slowest units in the game, but something that they are literally paired with in their decks is fast transport. So that's why decks and specs that are like motorized or wheeled in some form is very important to utilize that. So where I am rushing somebody with these vehicles and using the weapons on these tanks and IFVs to do the damage, the same can be said if you are taking these powerful infantry units, sticking them in lighter, faster infantry transports, getting them up and around other vehicles, or if they're anti-infantry, up and around other infantry, and just turn the table on them. You are literally taking the worst thing about infantry and just removing it when you put them in a fast vehicle. So use those fast vehicles, use, blitzkrieg tactics, use speed to get up on top of, especially if vehicles are in tree lines, if they're clumped up from urban environments, things like that, to get up on top of them, drop that infantry off, and they're going to do work. So keep that in mind, because you are going to be in a position to do that. I understand that I haven't given you an SF deck, so you can't use the MAAAWS, but you can still use the Marines, and you sure as shit can still use a bunch of these Russian units that you can get with these decks. So if you're having trouble, or maybe you just want to start using more infantry, maybe you want to get better with infantry, use infantry with the fast transports and get them on top of the vehicles that you're trying to kill. Remove that aspect of just having vehicles be better than infantry because they can shoot from further. Remove that distance, remove that from play, and they're still extremely effective, especially when you use these units in particular. Now, when that happens, that stage of the engagement is called the scrum or merge or dogpile. It's got a lot of different names. It's basically when you first clash. This is when you're all on top of each other. And if you plan accordingly, you might not worry much about the infantry at all, by the way. If you go and do what I said, which is, do a proper hot drop and, assault with your own infantry. Use the anti-tank infantry squads, the fastest transports. Keeping all that stuff in mind, I've been mentioning about the APS and smoke there as well. You could drop off and storm the buildings all while the other vehicles are providing fire support. However, these things can get messy, so be sure not to have vehicles engaging buildings that you are moving your guys into or close by. Lots of vehicles have grenade launchers, high explosive rounds, and even airburst. Thermobaric or incendiary is not a good idea to put your troops in front of, so think about turning those weapons off or the ammo for them off if you want to use your infantry instead, and you'll have have more of them alive on the other end. On that note, this wasn't even part of the script here. Watch out for your teammates. If you have somebody that is using a support deck nearby, chances are they might try to quote unquote help you by seeing all that infantry in front of you and trying to do like an incendiary grad rocket strike or an HE rocket strike or come in with bombs. Be very aware of not only the enemy, but your team, because the amount of times that I've had cruise missiles smack my vehicles because my team that is, you know, trying to help me out, but also not paying attention or doing the exact same thing that a enemy that you were trying to kill would do, which is not realizing you're going to move as fast as you move, will end up annihilating you themselves. So be very careful of that. Watch out for your teammates. If you have somebody that's quote unquote trying to help you, maybe as nicely as possible, just say, hey man, all good here. Thanks for the support though. I'll let you know if I need it because I'm worried about, you know, some friendly fire here. You know, who's to know if they even speak English? So just keep that in mind. Again, watch out for the enemy watch out for your team as much as you are watching out for your enemy, especially if you have some support players trying to quote unquote help you out. Honorable mention, queuing orders for armored assaults. Unfortunately, you can't queue an order to have vehicles fire at a building or area while moving forward, which is like, you know, that's the Fury scene. That's should be something you absolutely should do, but unfortunately you can't, as they'll just stop to shoot. However, what you can do is queue some of your units to jump the enemy while focusing on microing others for more effective support. For example, you can queue your transports to fast move up to a building from a road, then unload its infantry, and then just reverse back, again, keeping its armor to the front, being able to shoot those weapons, and the infantry will, again, they'll just be stuck in the middle of the road, ideally not, you know, panicked or anything like that, in which case, if they are anti-infantry, they can shoot their rockets into buildings, and they can still be supported and not actually taking the damage from those vehicles. So yeah, in some situations, it would be nice to push those infantry into buildings, but if your vehicles that you're dropping them off with have grenade launchers and they're being supported by tanks with heavy HE rounds, it might not actually be the play to push them into that building yet. Just keep that in mind. However, it is something that you can do. It's something that they're going to need to worry about, and it's going to be very successful because after that fight, the infantry can go into buildings from there or whatever you want, and while the entire time you were making sure your tanks weren't getting hit by cruise missiles, ATGMs, getting flanked, or really just anything. They were just there to support and picking off the most dangerous targets first. It creates chaos and overwhelms the enemy, which brings us to the next stage: fight or flight. The enemy player wants to run and save what they can. If they are intelligent, they are probably going to know they're about to get stomped. So it's important to keep track of not only if you can pursue to finish them off, but also where they run to. In most cases, if it is an urban environment, or at least there's buildings around, you should be good to go to just follow them. Just stay close to buildings and don't overextend too much. Just again, watch where they go and keep a mental note. That is potentially the new front line for them. More importantly, it could also be where they have other units coming from or holding. So it's important that that is what you will want to hit with artillery or Tillefriend 2. Extra concepts and gameplay beyond that will be discussed in other videos because you'll want to use your Arty or air for that. If you're using a deck with some, then go for it. Otherwise, take your win, move your front line up, rearm, repair, do what you can from there. At that point, you are now waiting for a counterattack. With the way the game works, you will gain more points over time the less units that you have in play. So the more successful you are at killing their stuff, the more points that they'll have soon enough to buy more things to send back at you, and they are going to be working with some very good information. They know exactly what you're using, they know exactly what you're bringing with you and where they are. As I mentioned before, if you time it right at the end of the game, they won't have time to buy anything. However, sometimes they do have time. Not to mention, it's just fun to just keep playing the game, to keep pushing and, you know, do something. In which case, if this is before the end of the game, you're going to need to defend. Which, believe it or not, is pretty simple. Just reverse what I've been teaching you and have your tanks ready as QRF. They will likely bomb and artillery you, so spread out and make sure they don't see where you're spreading to, so you can hide quietly and resupply if needed. Also remember, the best defense rather, is a good offense. Find where they're coming from and send IFVs and tanks at them. Just make them uncomfortable and on their toes. Always pay attention to where they go when they're hurt. Chances are the supplies are back there. Smack that with Arty, or tell a friend to, or ambush them on their route back. Now, I know we're talking a lot about phases, stages, tendencies, and stuff like that, but, you know, here's the last two of the primary focus here, which is what players tend to do when you're about to roll them with armor, and that are potentially the two most important stages of an enemy player's reaction that you need to remember, but you won't always need to worry about. That is the QRF and the help. The QRF, aka the quick reaction force, can be anything, but almost always it includes helicopters and planes. So you must always be ready to react to either and deal with that threat. Then there's the help. This is when the ability to see who's who is important. If the player you are about to roll over or just rolled over is in a Discord call or somehow has good teammates, you'll start to see not just one color of enemies in front of you, sometimes not just 2, sometimes not just 3, or even 4. Sometimes you see the entire other team will then go into the fight or flight based on what you are capable of handling and just try to annihilate you. The answer to this lies within the exact same stuff that you would use for QRF, so we'll go over them both together. A potential, and on some maps likely, QRF is a armored push into your advance or frontline. Keeping in mind everything I just taught you about ATGMs, which if they hit are great, so I'd still have some around, but I will say this because it's true. In the current state of the game, you will not have a better, cheaper, quicker option to handle tanks and mechanized units than tanks and mechanized units. And that is because 120mm main battle tank ammunition and the plethora of autocannons from 20, 30, 40, 50, and 57mm is good. Nothing will stop a tank or autocannon round from hitting it. There is no counter to that. While ATGMs, artillery, and bombs can be avoided or countered by moving or having smoke or APS and stuff like that. So you can't counter 840mm of kinetic penetrating, armor piercing, fin stabilized, discarding sable rounds unless you have more than 850mm of kinetic armor. AKA, you can't out armor something. You can't get out of the way of a tank round. The specifics of tank versus tank warfare can get complex, but I don't think it needs to be, truly. All you need to know is if it's a tank, shoot it with another tank or the largest fucking gun that you can find from the side or the back. Any of the APCs and IFVs in these decks when fighting any tanks from the side and especially the rear will make it have a very bad day, and it will for sure be in that position if you get lots of practice hiding from them and ambushing them or swarming them while your own tanks keep them facing one direction. Because the easiest way to get a tank killed is by getting it to turn around and show its ass to another tank. Or even, you know, that is the worst, but a lot of times they will try to maneuver. They'll try to keep the front armor to the things that are rushing them. So if you have a tank over at another angle, you're shooting into its side, and that's a dead tank right there. Your tanks are the most important thing to keep alive, even over your AA, because they're, for one, the most expensive, but two, the hardest to kill. So it can mean the difference between a win and a loss if you keep it alive from destruction points, or to capture a point and hold it until the timer runs out. So if you get swarmed on the ground, use your APCs as a final option, even take AA to smoke and then or shield your tanks if it's facing likely, and for sure if it's facing certain death, if it is at the end of the game. So use your tanks as your sniper rifle and your anchor, then everything else as support for those tanks, except the T-15. The T-15 you can use as a tank if you want until you face real tanks. On that note, I want you guys who think the T-15 is overpowered to watch this real quick. Literally any tank in the game, when keeping its frontal armor towards the T-15, will kill the T-15. Just don't send the things the T-15 is great at killing to try to kill it. Send tanks, not Bookers, not Bradleys, not M8s, tanks, and treat it as a priority, especially in close quarters, and you'll be fine. When you are using the T-15s, have fun, just send them at stuff. It's hilarious. And then when they send tanks, make sure that yours are close by to ambush them, because they're certainly trying to go after your T-15s. Then when they divert, just surround them, and it's awesome. Generally speaking, and this is a topic for another video, and it's also a fact, Russia is much, much easier to play in every single aspect in this game. You can literally take any of the Russian vehicles and put them up against their direct counters on the US side, and every single thing, whether it's helicopters against SHORAD, infantry versus infantry, tank versus tank, IFV versus IFV, the Russian counterparts simply just need to shoot and be in the fight. Meanwhile, its United States counterparts need to be micro, they need to reverse, they need to smoke, they need to flank, all that stuff. So keep that in mind when you're playing Russia, because unless some significant changes happen, all you need to do is just do the thing and you're good, statistically speaking. Honorable mention to the last second point sneaks and holds. If you happen to have a unit close by a point right at the end of a game with smoke or high stealth, or if the point has a lot of buildings, it's almost always worth it to try and keep and or sneak it next to a building in the corner or something, maybe some forest or something, to see if it can stop it or cap it in the time, before the game ends. All right, so moving on and yet back to the topic at hand. Armored and mechanized QRF is addressed by what you have in play. You just need to outplay them, which takes time and practice. If that fails, or if they don't send tanks, the quickest way to address a sudden blitzkrieg is air power. Most of the time, a player will quickly buy what they can for helicopters and planes to come and get you. Helicopters shouldn't be much of a threat because you've prepared and brought SHORAD to stop them. Just treat them the same way you'd treat ATGMs with wings. Micro your SHORAD to intercept and you'll be fine. Coincidentally, if the enemy player played their chopper in a bad way, you might not even need SHORAD. For example, if you smoke or hide behind a building, they might try to chase where they will almost certainly get within range of your machine guns or autocannons. Tanks, turret, machine guns are okay at killing choppers close up, and of course so are the autocannons from most APCs and IFVs, just because it's big bullet meat thing with not much armor. Now, what you do need to be very careful in these situations is if that helicopter has specifically rockets. If it has good rockets and they're at just the right angle above you, they might top shot your vehicle and completely destroy it, or at the very least hurt it significantly, which is why it's better to bring SHORAD or MAAAAAWS infantry with your push. But if you need to, it's a great last resort. And in some cases, especially if there's autocannons, fantastic. So let's talk about specifically what to use against those helicopters, and that's going to be your SHORAD. The most notable units here are, again, the vehicles I mentioned in the deck portion of the video, but to put an exclamation point on them, there's the Pantsir in the Russian Mechanized for its range on the missiles as well as close range cannons and its ability to intercept cruise missiles. The Derevitsia in Russian Armor for its 57mm cannon that will chunk helicopters and actually does a good job as ground fire support as well against infantry and light vehicles. The MTLB Gish that you get with Mechanized is also nice because it can bring troops, so it's handy and useful. The Strelets can turn its radar on as well to intercept choppers and cruise missiles. The Tor and Pantsir that you get with armored chunk and snipe choppers as well. Then we have the Sosna, which you won't need to micro. We'll just need to shoot long-range missiles at the choppers cheaply. Then, of course, try to stick infantry with man pads where you can. If there's not that many buildings, like if it's rural, you might need to only bring some recon infantry, a squad or two, and then just man pads, because all you need to do is spot infantry and your vehicles will clean up what they spot because they won't be able to hide. For US, you have the Stryker SHORAD, the linebacker, and the Lav Ad. Push the Lav Ad for choppers because it's great, but not well armored. Push the linebacker with your front and it will snipe choppers as well as intercept cruise missiles and will be able to take a hit. Use the Stryker behind the front because it won't be able to hide but will snipe with the radar on and intercept cruise missiles. If you're feeling cheeky, you can use the Pivads for the armor deck because they get smoke, will intercept cruise missiles, and if a chopper gets anywhere close enough, it will saw it in half. So it's handy to hide it in cheeky spots. It also eats infantry and light vehicles. It's kind of dope. Then don't forget the Vipers, or if you change them, the Super Cobras, with US Marine, since they have sidewinders. That's from the helicopter tab, in case that wasn't clear. So you can actually surprise people a lot with those, and you can even bait them by not moving SHORAD up and make them think they're good to come in with their choppers, then pounce on them. I don't suggest that though, to be clear. And then you got your Singer teams. As I was reading that, I also want to mention just the ability to use those Super Cobras and those Vipers are amazing. The vast majority of players, especially in the open, are gonna either on your team push with helicopters or have planes in the air on the enemy or have their own helicopters. So the fact that you can have these somewhat cheap, especially if you do the Super Cobras, they're only 135 points, to just stick some sidewinders on there and not take extra rockets and take the Hydras with them, the enemy will gladly and repeatedly lose 400 point plus planes trying to kill some Super Cobras or the choppers that they're around because they think they're 300 point helicopters when they're only 135. So those are very good. Don't sleep on those, apart from the fact that they are sidewinders on wings or sidewinders that hover. Now, something to very much keep at the top of your head when you are playing as United States or when you're playing Russia versus Russia. Russian helicopters are significantly better than US choppers. You will need to fear them and overcompensate wherever possible. Here's a quick example for you. This is the chopper rush any Russian player can bring with them for 1,600 points. I'll have them go against a variety of units that you can bring. It's a good idea to have something other than the SHORAD or man pads that you've brought with you in front when the choppers come, so they shoot at those first. What works great is infantry in a building. They'll keep moving forward, but turn and shoot their loads, giggity, at the infantry while getting lit up by the SHORAD Lavat or whatever. So keep that in mind. If there is a Russian player who is airborne, especially if they're airborne Marine, unfortunately, they might have even seen my videos and they might know that this is a thing, but it is going to become very popular eventually. There's going to be Russian airborne motorized players that are very much support players. They've got the Su-24s, they've got the Grads, they've got the Smerches, they've got good infantry and they can get someplace quickly, along with all the bombers and stuff that they can do. Chances are they are going to do this, so you need to watch out. But anybody that has, especially a Russian airborne deck, a Russian airborne spec, a Russian Marine spec, or a Russian motorized spec, but to a lesser extent, will be able to do this. So if you see a bunch of Russian airborne Marine, airborne motorized, Marine motorized, whatever, those combinations in particular, they're going to have helicopters. There's a chance that they do this to you. Be careful. And while we're talking about things to be scared of, you have cluster bombs from a variety of planes. If you see an F-15 doing circles behind the enemy line, they are trying to decide which of your units to bomb. So maybe hide, or if you have SAMs up or a teammate is helping, then do something about it. If they get through, it's not the end of the world. You'll take losses. Just try not to bunch up and do what you can to dodge or bait them so that you get the points for the kills. Refer back to my jumpy or impulsive wing lord portion of the video for a reminder of how to benefit from that. Now, what the real problem is, the bombers that can low altitude bomb, like the Su-24, Fighting Falcon, F-15, even the F-18 can do the low altitude bomb stuff. Those will be difficult to shoot down and are the meta right now, in particular the Su-24s and F-15s. Although I think people just haven't gotten around to using the F-16s yet. Again, try to make the enemy show their hand on what they do against clumps of vehicles as soon as possible. Don't bunch up and plan accordingly. Full-on throwing away units in phase 1 is completely fine if it means that you can dismantle your enemy in phase 3. So get them to show their hand as soon as possible, then bash them over the head when they go to play it again. Now, I know I called those the real problem, but even more real problems is the B2 nukes. Always pay attention to the SF players for US teams. For one, they'll have MAAAAWS. For second, they'll have a Sentinel. And for third, they'll have the B2 with the 30,000 pounders. And for fourth, they could also have the B2 with the nuke. If you are playing a coordinated team stack, they absolutely can coordinate to get the B2 nuke off multiple times a game. And you, as an armored player, as I said at the very beginning, taking ground will absolutely be the priority. Unless you are super on the ball or have good teammates, you will not. In fact, you can't avoid that. It is too easy to do with a coordinated team. The best you can do is stagger and spread out, maybe float points. If you somehow know one is coming, you should have a plan for that. So that's why it's nice to have some recon behind the sides, or to try and pick a different part of the map to try and, push through or something like that. There's definitely ways around it. It involves a lot of luck, and if you're playing a coordinated team, they're going to stop you from doing it. It's inevitable. So don't let it bring you down and try to learn from it. Now, I know I said that the real problem was low altitude cluster bombs, and then again, the B2 nukes, and then again, there. But the actual real problem, and it is, however, the real problem, is cluster artillery. If you aren't catching on here, these are all problems, and they are all real big problems. They're all real big problems that you can't avoid. You can only play around them and learn from. The cluster artillery is going to humble you. It got me recently really good when I decided to argue with my team in text chat rather than focus on playing. So again, watch out for that too. The community's getting smaller and more toxic. So if your team starts yapping, which they will in a solo queue, just mute them and stay focused. You can mute in the scoreboard with that volume icon. Russian motorized is the most effective support spec in the game. It's got great S-300s and super powerful artillery with the Smerch and the Grad. If you are fighting a Russian motorized player with a artillery fetish, which you will at some point, if not every single game, all of the trees and the buildings within a square mile of your units will be burnt down from Grads and cut in half by cluster. Try and bait them to shoot cheap units that you leave in the open on purpose, or even expensive ones, while you watch for them firing. And as long as you do the thing where you count to 10 and then move, chances are they'll be aiming at it. The best way to counter it is staying mobile. Actually, I lied. The best way to counter it is to find it and fucking kill it, but you know what I mean. You could even potentially suicide burn your units where you throw the cheaper ones into the enemy so they don't even get the chance to use that artillery on you, while having to divert their resources and supply to it much less often because they have to go to the front line. And then you can use your own Arty to hit the supply depots or it when you do switch up your tactic at the end, which is the important part. Switch up your tactic, have them get used to you throwing your stuff away at the front line, but them having to constantly recoup their cost. And then by the end of it, they're going to either not have their artillery because you ended up finding it, or it's out of supplies or something. They're not going to be ready for you actually pushing with armor, which is going to be the most effective thing. So just be very careful with that, because chances are if they are somebody that has a artillery fetish, that does not happen often. Assume that they're always going to be ready, or that they have a teammate ready to use it. So that whole last section there is the real game within the game when you are playing armored or mechanized. You will be battling low altitude bombers, helicopter rushes if you're the US, stealth nukes if you're Russia, and cluster artillery constantly, always. But those things need to exist, otherwise we'd be unstoppable. And if you're wondering how, go ahead and restart the video, because believe it or not, I just explained it all. I explained all you need to do is believe and practice in what I just explained, and that genuinely is unstoppable. Armored Mechanized gameplay is the strongest composition in the game when used correctly, as its counters are all airborne, which if prepared, will get shot down or avoided or able to run away from, if not defeated outright, aka other armored mechanized players, in which case ask your teammates with cluster artillery, cluster bombers, helicopters, and B2 nukes to help you out. It is super rewarding to fight through full teams on the ground using a bit of smoke tanks and a metric ton of brute force. So have fun with it, guys. When you put it all together, it looks like this: a well-established front line with recon to spot enemy movement and formations, as well as their front line. You got units that can hold the line and make sure the enemy isn't pushing through unopposed. Probes and information gathering with light units to find where the enemy is strongest and weakest, allowing you to plan where to attack. A pushing force we'll be using to take the ground, staging somewhere behind the line and out of view of the enemy until the last possible moment. SHORAD and SAMs prepare to counter air. Your pushing force split into groups and spread out to avoid too much damage from bombs and artillery, while the pushing force heads into the fight looking for priority targets like armor, direct threats, or enemy AA. ATGMs open up, lead vehicle smokes and covers the following, then continues to push. Eyes on the horizon for helicopters and planes with SHORAD and SAMs, again in place to counter. Not to gloss over some of the other extra stuff that you can do. We got APCs and IFEs pushing into buildings with troops to clear and hold the area, tanks in the back to support and kill other tanks. Get eyes out, check for recon in the surrounding area, then move your entire front line up and wait for the counterattack, or if you timed it right, win the game. That is mechanized warfare in Broken Arrow. This video took well over 40 hours to produce, and I am not even done there. I will be continuing to make tutorial videos like this, as well as scenarios to accompany them, of which you'll find in the various playlists below, as well as in the various channels within our Discord you will find linked below. Make sure that you select the Broken Arrow role. Reminder, you can find the decks around there too, and dozens of examples of me using their units and these tactics in various maps across the channel. I am potentially going to start coaching players, so stay tuned for that. We will be doing a lot of community games on stream, as well as deck reviews, things like that. Really, guys, follow the Twitch channel. It'll be the easiest way for you to critique or ask me questions as well. If I am live, it'll be real time. Otherwise, guys, support what I do by clicking the buttons on the screen or coming by a stream. Once this is live on YouTube, I will be as well. And if you're watching this weeks or months after it's up, check anyway, I'm probably live. Thank you guys for listening. Good luck out there, and I hope you have a nice day. See you guys.